For years, the on-screen electricity between Barış Baktaş and Yağmur Yüksel has been the kind of spark that refuses to fade, even when the cameras stop and the sets are torn down. Long after their shared projects wrapped, their names still move together in whispers, posts, and late-night replays, as if tied by an unspoken thread only fans can hear. What began as a professional pairing crafted by casting calls and scripts quickly turned into a legend built by audiences who noticed every glance, every breath held a second too long, every line delivered like a secret. That early partnership, born under bright lights and production schedules, has evolved into a tale people guard like a cherished memory, one they revisit when they want to remember what television romance can do to a heart. Industry insiders still talk about the weight their connection carried. Some say it's rare to see two performers find such singular tempo together, others insist it was more than luck, more than chemistry, more than rehearsed timing. Even as casts rotated, projects changed tone, and careers branched into daring new directions, the resonance of what Barış and Yağmur built seemed to defy expiration dates. Viewers did not just recall scenes. They relived them, pulling up clips, freezing frames, and rewatching interviews to search for that fleeting flash. The way his smile softened when she entered a room, the thoughtful way she listened when he spoke. They turned the ordinary language of press junkets into poetry, building narratives in the spaces between words. The scenes people cling to are not always the grand declarations or the scripted embraces. Often, the memory that returns like a tide is smaller. The pause before a reply, a glance slipped in before a cut, the nervous laugh that feels too natural to be planned. Fans loved how Barış, with his steady presence and gentle humor, seemed to make the moment safer, how Yağmur, with her laser-focused quiet, could turn a simple look into something that sounded like a vow. Together they felt synced, like two instruments tuning to the same pitch. That feeling never entirely left the room, even as they each took on new roles and stood opposite new faces. It's no accident that people still scour social media for crumbs. An innocuous caption about sunlight and patience, a line from a poem posted on a quiet evening, a throwback photo shared when no one expected it, each becomes a spark in dry grass. When Barış likes a post that isn't overtly about her but could be if you tilt your head just so, conversations begin. When Yağmur leaves a comment that reads like a thank you but looks like a message tucked under a door, threads unravel into new theories. Each little gesture leads to a wave of speculation. Did something linger? Did something start? Did something end with words we never heard? There was an award night when they were seated 2 tables apart, the kind of arrangement that could be incidental or arranged by fate. A camera cut to them both as the host joked about fairy tales no one wants to admit are real. In that fragment, the eyes of a million viewers turned translators, parsing their expressions as if decoding a language handed down through cinema. She smiled, small but sure. He glanced, then looked away, then looked again. Later, when a reporter asked about the past, Barış said their partnership had taught him to listen more closely. Another mic caught Yağmur saying working with him had made her braver on set. 2 ordinary answers. Yet somehow neither felt ordinary to the people who'd been waiting to hear just that. Friends and crew observed habits that fed the legend. Between takes, they traded notes like co-conspirators in the pursuit of honesty. He brought extra warm tea because the studio AC could be relentless. She remembered to ask about his mother's health before each long night shoot. It was the kind of mutual care that doesn't need an audience, but it had one anyway. Hair and makeup teams claimed they hardly spoke before hard scenes, saving the emotional current for the moment the slate clapped. A director once said he seldom had to give them the same note twice. They were already watching each other so closely that adjustments seemed to ripple between them without being spoken. Not everyone reads the same story in the same lines. Some maintain that fans project too much, that the love lingering around Barış and Yağmur is a mirror reflecting what viewers wish to see. For these skeptics, the fascination endures because of harmony, the rare kind of artistic equilibrium that makes a pair unforgettable without requiring any off-screen epilogue. But ask others and they'll tell you that this level of authenticity cannot be rehearsed. They point to the interviews where he turns just so, as if waiting for her to jump in. To the moments where she holds the silence like a shared glass of water. They insist that what aired was rooted in something real, even if that something had no label, even if it belonged only to the days when the set lights hummed and the boom operator held his breath. While the world argued in comments sections and group chats, Barış and Yağmur did what working actors must do: they moved forward. Scripts arrived. Auditions were won. Red carpets kept their dates. They chose roles that stretched them, surprised them, altered how people saw them alone. He leaned into stories that demanded patience and resolve. She found parts that required a quieter sort of courage, the kind built from stillness. Their careers did not freeze in nostalgia's amber. They grew. And yet, despite the growth, the joint myth refused to step aside. Their shared story followed at a respectful distance, never grabbing the wheel but never stepping out of the car. Fans kept returning to the archives, like visitors to a favorite city. They revisited laughing bloopers, behind-the-scenes clips where fatigue slipped into goofy camaraderie, interviews where one finished the other's sentence without seeming to notice. Even moments that once felt trivial gained new weight. A slip of a jacket onto shivering shoulders, a nod across a chaotic press crowd that looked like a private hello, a playlist she recommended that he later saved. Time made these fragments glow. Every rewatch became a vote in favor of the idea that something rare had once stood where they stood, something that doesn't dissolve just because the credits have rolled. Occasionally, life itself played into the myth. A charity gala placed them on the same guest list, and though they arrived separately and left with their respective teams, the photos captured what needed no captions. Two people still tuned to the same weather, aware of each other in a room full of lights. Another time, a director they had both worked with posted a wistful note about trust, adding a heart in the color of dusk. No names were mentioned, but anyone watching knew. The comments sections filled with a stubborn hope the industry never quite manages to name. It would be easy to reduce all of this to rumor feeding and fan fiction, to scold the public appetite for stories that stretch beyond what can be confirmed. And yet, to deny the staying power of what Barış and Yağmur created together would be dishonest. Their screen-shared language sank deep. It took root and made a home in people who needed to be reminded that connection can look as modest as eye contact and feel as enormous as a sunrise. Whether any private chapter ever unfolded out of frame almost doesn't matter. What matters is that audiences recognize themselves in their scenes, in the way two people can find the same rhythm without a map, and in the way that rhythm can continue to echo long after the band has packed up. There are whispers that the emotional depth they projected on screen wasn't some stroke of fortune. Actors speak about mutual respect the way athletes talk about team chemistry, but with these two, respect sounded more like a promise. He listened in a way that steadied the room. She steadied him back by meeting his intensity with her own brand of grace. Respect turned to understanding, understanding turned to ease. Ease became the foundation under their most daring moments. If you ask crew members to pick a favorite, they name scenes where not much happens. A conversation at a kitchen table, a pause at a window, a slow smile earned and not given. Those scenes changed people, because they suggested a truth viewers are always hunting for, a truth that doesn't shout. So here we are, years later, still talking about two names that won't separate no matter how often we pretend to set them down. Their new works draw praise, and rightly so. Yet even triumphs achieved individually carry a faint, familiar chord, as if the first note of any success still harmonizes with the other's memory. Maybe that's what all great pairings do. They plant a rhythm that keeps time in the background of everything that follows. The rhythm doesn't demand attention, but if you stop and listen, you'll find it there, patient as a heartbeat. Every so often, a coincidence fans can't dismiss shows up on a quiet Tuesday. A magazine asks them both similar questions months apart, and the answers align like constellations in a summer sky. She mentions patience and truth. He mentions truth and patience. A week later, he posts a sunset the same hour she posts the sea. Are they speaking to each other across the void, or speaking to themselves in the same language they once shared? The line between those options is thin enough to be a thread. Of course, reality rarely gives us clean resolutions. There is no public confession here, no official announcement to pin on a timeline. All we have are what they gave us, scenes so intimately calibrated they feel like overheard memories, gestures so considerate they read as vows, and a legacy of craft that keeps their names paired in the public imagination. Whether the feelings fans dream of ever existed beyond the script is a question that may never be answered. The miracle is that the question endures without souring. It remains tender, hopeful, almost reverent. In the end, the tale of Barış Baktaş and Yağmur Yüksel continues not because someone proved anything, but because of the strength of a bond audiences felt when they watched two professionals carry a story with their whole selves. That bond lives on in the people who witnessed it, who refuse to let it dim, who believe that what is sincere on screen must have roots deeper than the outline of a scene. Maybe that belief is its own kind of truth. Maybe the world needs certain myths to keep faith with what we know about connection, that it arrives quietly, demands respect, and survives change. And so the thought of them, together, lingers like a final look before the lights fade, like the warmth of a hand that once rested in yours and left a heat you can still feel when you close your eyes. If you listen closely, you can still hear it. It's in the way an old clip stops you mid-scroll. It's in the way a friend texts you late at night to say, "Look at this, I think they meant more than they said." It's in the silence after a scene ends, the moment when you realize you were holding your breath and don't know why. It's in the relief you feel when you remember that stories like this don't need to be finished to be real. They only need witnesses. And in this, there has never been a shortage. Barış and Yağmur gave us something carefully built and honestly shared. We keep it safe by believing, by returning to it, by letting it show us who we are when we love a thing enough to press pause, look again, and discover that what we thought was acting still somehow feels like home. So the legend endures, not as gossip printed in ink, but as a quiet insistence that some partnerships are more than the moment they're wrapped in. It drifts through new premieres and old montages, through festival carpets and candid photos, through interviews where the past shows up like an old friend who doesn't demand explanation. This is not a story that begs to be solved. It is a story that asks to be held. And in the holding, we honor the rare alignment two artists once found, the kind that rearranges what we expect from fiction and reminds us that even in a world of scenes and takes, some truths simply refuse to fade.